Hello everyone, it's Greg from Edinburgh Renaissance Fencing Academy here with another video, this time on the topic of Renaissance violence. So this is an obvious connection to the study of historical fencing, particularly for me because my main focus is the swordsmanship system of Giacomo di Grassi, which is from the 16th century, the Renaissance period. So I really want to explore today the realities of how violence happened in this period of Europe's history. And in particular, I want to give you 3 book recommendations which really describe violence in a fairly detailed and interesting way. There is a tendency in fencing circles to romanticize the sword and the art of swordsmanship, which can be kind of harmless fun to a certain extent, but as we are studying arts that were intended to be used in real combat for fatal purposes, I think it is important every so often to take a step back and think about what that really meant in the original period. Okay, let's go through the 3 books and I shall explain some more. Okay, the first book I want to recommend is this one. It's called April Blood by Lauro Martinez. This is an account of the so-called Pazzi conspiracy, which happened in late 15th century Florence. So that's in the earliest part of what we call the Renaissance. This is a modern history book. Very well written. I really like the writing style of Lauro Martinez. It's almost poetic in parts, but yeah, very well researched. And covers a variety of aspects of the conspiracy, social and political backgrounds, the violence that resulted from this plot, and the consequences of it. In case you're not familiar, the Pazzi conspiracy was an attempted coup d'etat against the de facto government of the Medici family. And it was organized by their rivals, the Pazzi family, and various other factions which were disgruntled with the Medici for various reasons. So the gist of the conspiracy was an attempt to assassinate the 2 heads of the Medici family, 2 brothers. And then the idea was that a kind of revolutionary government would be set up in the aftermath of the assassinations to shift power in a different direction. I won't spoil the events too much in case you want to read the book and you're not familiar with events. I'll just say that the assassination did not go as planned and some truly horrible violence resulted from it. And the horror of that violence is really one of the aspects that most intrigues me about the book. Florence was a very cultured place at that time, and one of the epicenters of this kind of glorious Renaissance culture. But the violence that we read about in the book is anything but glorious. It's nasty, nasty stuff. And I think that's important to read about. It shows the application of martial arts skills, or at least the most likely application of martial arts skills in a life or death situation, which was not necessarily some romanticized version of a duel, but actually for some vicious political fighting. So yes, that's my first recommendation, April Blood. Okay, my second book recommendation is this one. I actually only own it in digital format, but here's the cover of it. It's the Autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini. So, as you can tell from the title, this is a period text. So it's written by Cellini himself. It's an overview of the main events of his rather dramatic life. Now, Cellini is most famous as an artist, so he produced some well-known and extremely valuable works of art in the field of goldsmithing and sculpture, but he dabbled with a lot of different crafts like this. However, he also acted as a soldier in part of his career and was a notorious hothead and brawler. And his brother, who he was quite close to, was a mercenary. So the events of Cellini's life are not only dramatic but violent on many occasions. And he's quite frank about the sort of violence that he was involved in, particularly in and around Rome, but he also has some interesting anecdotes about violence or the threat of violence when travelling between cities as well. So it's definitely a very frank description of the sorts of stuff that went on in the 16th century in Italy and also in France. Now, I should say that as a writer, in his autobiography, Cellini has clearly exaggerated some of the things which went on to put himself in the best light possible, as you can imagine. But I think the core of it is quite honest and in places quite shocking. Again, without giving too many spoilers, but he basically just straight up murders somebody in the middle of the street in broad daylight in Rome at one point, and is very unapologetic about it. So again, that is the grim reality of how swords and other bladed weapons were often used in the Renaissance period. Okay, my final book recommendation for today is this one, The Siege of Malta, 1565, and it's originally by Francisco Balbi di Correggio. Francisco Balbi was a foot soldier in the armies of the Knights of Malta. So that's the Knights of St. John of Malta. Now, excuse me, the Knights of St. John themselves were Templars, so they were a member of a military religious order who controlled Malta in the 16th century. But they also employed secular or lay members of society to function as foot soldiers, with the knights in the position of officers. Now, they were mostly a naval force, but they did fight on land as well, of course. And in 1565, their island was invaded by the armies of the Ottoman Turks and their allies from the Barbary states in North Africa, which prompted a truly desperate defense of the Knights' headquarters there. And Francisco Balbi was right in the thick of the action. And after it was all over and the Knights had successfully fought off the Ottoman invasion, Balbi wrote this account. It's a particularly interesting text to read because it's written in a very matter-of-fact and I would say mostly objective style. You would probably expect an author of that period to introduce lots of prejudice into his text, like racial prejudice and religious prejudice, but actually there isn't too much of that in the book. Balbi is quite respectful of the Turkish opponents, actually, and he recognizes that they were a very potent military force, and he discusses the strategies and tactics of both sides with a keen professional eye. However, from the point of view of learning about Renaissance violence, this will tell you the realities of battlefield combat in quite a lot of detail, and it is brutal, desperate, and bloody. There are definitely elements of genuine, real heroism in it, but yeah, a lot of it is just brutality. So this one's definitely worth reading to give you that kind of battlefield point of view of Renaissance combat. So just to give a short conclusion to today's video, it's important to read about the realities of violence in the period of history you're interested in, Renaissance in my case, because it helps keep you grounded as a martial arts practitioner. There is, quite frankly, a lot of macho bullshit around the practice of martial arts in the modern world. But at the end of the day, particularly in the case of historical fencing, most of us are studying it as a hobby. We're learning the technical aspects of the martial art and some of the history and philosophy and fitness training and so on. But we're not training to be warriors. The reality of war or even personal violence is laid bare in these books and other similar publications. And it's worth thinking about what that means for your training, like for the techniques you're trying to do, for your approach to the fight. I'm not suggesting for a minute you should go out there and become some kind of psychopathic murderer like Cellini, but it's just worth thinking about and dispelling some of the delusions or fantasies that can build up in the minds of some martial arts practitioners. I really love fencing, but I really hate violence, and I would not like to be in any of these situations at all. They are not nice, they're not glorious, they are horrific. But I still recommend reading about them. So, that's all I wanted to say for today. I hope if you get the chance to read these books that you enjoy them and find them as interesting and enlightening as I did. All right, that's it. Take care, everyone. See you again soon. Bye.